Most of my life, I thought being tired was just what happens when you get older. That you wake up already worn down and spend the rest of the day trying to catch up with your own body. My name is Leonard. I am 76 years old, and only now am I starting to understand that the exhaustion I lived with for decades was trying to tell me something I kept refusing to hear. For as long as I can remember, there was this dull ache in my lower back. Nothing sharp or dramatic, just a steady pressure that followed me like a shadow. And because it never knocked me to the ground, I treated it like it wasn't worth my attention. I worked most of my life with my hands and my spine, lifting boxes, bending, twisting, standing on hard floors for hours. And when the pain crept in, I would just shift my weight and keep going, telling myself that real problems were the kind you could see or measure, not the kind that quietly drained you day after day. By the time I was in my 40s, I was already waking up tired. Not the kind of tired that goes away with a cup of coffee, but a deep, heavy tired that made everything feel like it took more effort than it should. I blamed my job. I blamed the stress of raising a family. I blamed getting older. And in a strange way, it was comforting to have those excuses, because it meant I didn't have to look any closer at what my own body was trying to tell me. What I didn't realize then was that I was living in a constant state of tension, my back muscles always bracing, always guarding against pain. And that quiet fight was stealing energy from everything else. Even when I was sitting, even when I was trying to rest, part of me was still holding tight, like a clenched fist that never quite opens. And over the years, that kind of strain doesn't just hurt your back. It seeps into your sleep, your mood, your patience, and your sense of who you are. I remember coming home in the evenings and feeling like the day had taken more out of me than it should have, snapping at people I loved. Not because they had done anything wrong, but because I felt so worn thin that even small things felt heavy. My wife used to ask me what was wrong, and I would shrug and say nothing, because I didn't know how to explain that nothing in particular was wrong. I was just so very tired all the time. Doctors would ask about pain, and I would mention my back in passing, the way you mention an old creaky door in your house, something you live with and stop thinking about. And they would nod and move on to more urgent things. So I learned to move on too, to treat that ache as part of the background of my life, even as it quietly shaped everything I did. It wasn't until a few years ago, when the pain finally demanded to be noticed, that I began to see the whole picture. I had a day when I could barely get out of bed, when that familiar dull ache had turned into something that made every movement feel like a negotiation. And in that stillness, I realized how long I had been fighting my own body instead of listening to it. Physical therapy, gentle exercises, learning how to sit and stand and sleep in ways that didn't keep feeding the problem. All of that slowly started to loosen the grip my back had on me, and with it, something else began to change too. I started waking up with a little more energy, not because I was suddenly young again, but because I wasn't spending all night and all day locked in that silent struggle against pain. What surprised me most was how much of my tiredness had never really been about age at all. It had been about living with something that hurt and pretending it didn't, about carrying a weight I could have set down if I had been willing to admit it was there. There is a kind of fatigue that comes from work and years and responsibility. And then there is the fatigue that comes from ignoring what your body is asking for. and I had been confusing the two for most of my life. Now, at 76, I move more slowly, but I feel more present in my own skin. I notice when something doesn't feel right, and I give it the attention I used to think I didn't have time for. And in doing that, I have found a little more ease, a little more space to breathe, a little more energy to enjoy the small moments that make up a day. If you are listening to this and you feel tired in a way that doesn't make sense, I hope you take a moment to listen to yourself, not with fear, but with the kind of curiosity you would give to someone you care about. Sometimes the body whispers for years before it raises its voice, and sometimes all it wants is to be heard before it has to shout.